Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Are we becoming a renter's nation? And more importantly, are we all going to be renting from mega corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard here in the next few years? Because if you look at social media, that sure does seem to be the case, and it's quite scary. So what I want to do is go over the top 3 most popular claims I've seen on social media about this issue, and then I want to cover whether they are true, partially true, or false. Now, I do want to preface this video by saying I have no affinity for mega corporations, and if it were up to me, every single family residence would go to a first-time homebuyer or an average American. With that said, this is a personal finance channel, which means we must follow the data. So let's do just that. As always, my name is Derek, and I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. These are the 3 claims that we are going to be covering. Claim 1, BlackRock is going around and purchasing entire communities at 50% above asking, pretty much outbidding every single normal buyer. Yeesh. Claim 2, RFK Jr., a presidential hopeful, claimed that asset managers could own 60% of all homes in this country by 2030, a quite frightening proposition if true. And claim 3, that investors own 25% of all homes in America. And if you actually Google this question, Google will show you this question and then it'll highlight this percentage, which kind of leaves room for misinterpretation, but we will talk about that more in depth when we actually cover claim 3. So let's go claim by claim and let's talk about these things. So claim 1, that BlackRock is going in and purchasing entire communities at 50% above asking, pretty much outbidding everybody, comes from something that did happen, but it seems to be a misinterpretation of what actually happened. So when you dig into the data, an asset manager did purchase an entire community. That's kind of scary. With that said, it wasn't BlackRock, it was Fundrise. And on top of that, the community that was purchased was a build-to-rent community, which means that this community was built from the beginning by the builder, not to be sold to individual families, but to be sold as rentals. So it is scary that Fundrise, an asset manager, was able to come in and purchase an entire community. With that said, it's not entirely true because these were not single-family homes meant for single-family buyers. On top of that, we have to talk about the 50% above asking. This is actually a misinterpretation of the builder's profit margin, which seems to be 50%. So that is much different than the buyer, Fundrise, coming into the market and paying 50% above asking. On top of all that, now BlackRock did not purchase this community. With that said, people claim that BlackRock did. Now I think that people are basically confusing 2 companies. So BlackRock deals primarily in equities and the stock market, but there is a company that deals primarily in, maybe I shouldn't say primarily, but heavily in the real estate market, and that is called Blackstone. So very similar name. People are probably confusing it because of the similar name and because these companies were connected years ago when they were first started. With that said, Blackstone does own 25,000 single-family homes, which sounds like a lot, because it is a lot, but we have to dive deeper into the data to figure out if this is actually a meaningful amount, which we will under claim 3. So right off the bat, claim 1 does seem to be a misinterpretation from the truth, although an asset manager did purchase an entire community, not at 50% above asking. Okay, claim number 2, RFK Jr., the presidential hopeful, claimed that asset managers might own 60% of all residential homes by 2030. Now, I dug, and I couldn't find anything to substantiate this or back up this claim. So I actually want to ask you, if you have any sort of data that backs this claim up, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear it. I haven't seemed to be able to find anything. I will say this. This is not a political channel, and this will not become a political channel, but when it comes to politics, it is good to rally up your voters by pointing blame at some faceless corporation. And at the end of the day, all politicians want to be elected. And in order to be elected, you have to have a strong base. And in order to have a strong base, you have to have a strong enemy that you claim is against your voters, right? So I'm not playing politics here. I'm just saying that it is very easy to place blame at faceless corporations, and it's probably good for politics. I have not found anything that substantiates that. So if you have anything that substantiates that, please let me know. All right. Now, and one more thing I want to preface by, I have no political horse in the race. I think that all politicians are basically self-interested, so I'm not here to pick sides. All right. Now, claim 3. Claim 3 is pretty terrifying because it would mean that basically some of your neighbors' homes are owned by mega corporations, and that is that investors own 25% of all homes in America. Like I said, if you Google this, it'll actually highlight this percentage, which can leave room for misinterpretation. Now, it is true that in some areas, investors are purchasing 25% of all homes. Now, you have to understand that buying is different from holding, all right? And on top of that, you also have to understand that investors have always purchased a significant portion of available homes. Usually, it's around 16% historically. That is up to 25% recently. So it is an increase. But you also have to understand, like I said, there is a difference between buying and holding. What happens after these investors purchase these homes are less known. And on top of that, you have to understand that the definition of an investor is quite muddy. It can be a mega corporation. It can also be a mom and pop shop. And when we go over the data here, you're going to see that. But first and foremost, I do want to cover this. So 350,000 homes are owned by all corporate landlords. So that sounds like a lot, okay? For example, Blackstone owns 25,000. The total is 350,000. But when you compare this to total supply, which is a little under 100 million, right, about 97 million homes, that is actually only about 0.35 or 0.36% ownership of the entire market. So it is under 1%. It's under 0.5%. And if you dive deeper into this data, you also have to understand that investor can mean just mom and pop shops with a few rental properties. So if you actually break this into different parts, mom and pop operations, basically anyone with 1 to 9 properties, make up for 50% of this buying activity. So cut 25% in half already. On top of that, while mega corporations do own properties, they only account for about 9% of investor operations. So again, mom and pop account for 50%. Mega corporations, which means they own 1,000 properties or more, only account for about 9%. And when you look at the total buying activity across the board, it's only 2% of the total buying activity when you include regular first-time home buyers or people moving, etc. So it is still quite a small percentage. So the big argument is that mega corporations, one, is going to turn us into a renter's nation, and two, it's one of the reasons why housing prices are so high. Now, if you remove 2% from the market, I'm not quite sure if that lowers demand enough to have any meaningful change nationally. Now, with that said, it might be that there are pockets in this nation where corporations are significantly driving up the price. There is also a theory that basically corporations purchase homes and then take them off the market to drive up the value of the other homes that are on their books. Now, I haven't been able to find much data for this, but it might very well be the case. Corporations are after profit after all. So what I want to do now is kind of give you my thoughts on a couple issues. I want to give you my thoughts on why the real estate market is so high if it is not because of mega corporations. And I also want to talk about my thoughts in regards to mega corporations owning real estate to begin with. So in my opinion, housing is this gray area where on one side of the coin, housing is a necessity. Okay, everybody needs a house and everyone should have the right to a house. On the flip side, housing also makes up a lot of this nation's wealth, not just in the mega corporation section, but to the average American. In fact, it makes up more wealth to the average American than it does to the top 0.01%. So if we call for a crash in the real estate market, or we think we need to build so many houses that it brings the property values of homes down, you are really affecting middle-class America for the most part because their net worths are going to take the heaviest hit, unfortunately. With that said, I don't necessarily think that mega corporations should own a huge majority of the housing market. I don't even know if I'm comfortable with mega corporations owning 2 or 3% of the housing market, which means that legislation might be needed to curb this demand coming from mega corporations. Now, with that said, why do I think that the housing market is actually unaffordable right now? Do I think it's mega corporations? No, not necessarily. And I've said this in previous videos. It is a supply and demand issue. And at the end of the day, there is not enough supply to keep up with demand. And new builds are barely recovering to the levels that we saw pre-pandemic and pre-recession. On top of that, when you look at the building activity, you actually see that only 7% of current houses being built are starter homes, whereas opposed to 1980, 40% of homes being built were starter homes. Why? Well, right now it currently has to do with interest rates and because builders have to make a profit. And right now interest rates are extremely high. Also, building costs are extremely high. So for a builder, it makes more sense to build, I don't want to say luxury homes, but upper market homes, because when they sell those, they have a higher profit margin. So again, all of our problems stem from basically 2020, monetary policies that were enacted in 2020, inflation, and interest rates. So until we get building costs down and until interest rates come down, builders are going to have a hard time building starter homes because they're not profitable. Or if we get a government program to basically subsidize builders, which I know a lot of you, and myself included, not necessarily sure if we're comfortable with our tax dollars being used for private companies. But something needs to change in the real estate market in order for these prices to become more affordable. And I think people are frustrated and furious with the real estate market and the current state that it is in. So it's easy to place blame at these big corporations. Here's the thing that I want to tell you, and I kind of want to cover here if you're still watching at the end of the video. Maybe corporations in this instance are not the ones to blame. Now, I think corporations have plenty of problems and they cause plenty of problems. But in this instance, maybe they're not the ones to blame. With that said, there is still blame that needs to be put somewhere. Now, don't play political games. I'm not here to pick a side, but our current political policies and policies that have been enacted in the past, in the last decade, 2 decades, under both sides of the aisle have caused these problems. Most recently, the Federal Reserve has printed a bunch of money and the United States government has borrowed a bunch of money to basically create stimulus during 2020 and that whole mess. And now we're basically playing catch up and trying to sweep up the mess, which means that we have high interest rates because the Federal Reserve is trying to curb that inflation that was caused by the very monetary policies that were enacted to try to get us or keep us out of a major depression when 2020 happened. So, mismanagement, misuse of funds, maybe too much money printed, all those things are definitely or could definitely be a cause for what's going on. Whether they were worth it or not comes down to whether you think we should have shut down the economy or not during this whole mess. Again, I'm not here to talk politics. I'm here to state facts. That seems to be the case. In this instance, corporations maybe not the ones to blame, although they have plenty of their own problems and they cause plenty of their own problems, so I understand that. With that said, I hope this video was helpful. I hope this video was informative. If you have any sort of data to substantiate RFK Jr.'s claim that 60% of all homes are going to be owned by asset managers by 2030, please let me know because I couldn't find any. I am very curious. Other than that, if you like personal finance, if you like world economics, if you like investing broken down simply, you are in the right place. That's all we do here on this channel. This is a relatively new YouTube channel and it is something that I'm very passionate about. So if this video helped you, please consider subscribing. It means the world to me. And don't forget to turn on the bell notification. New videos come out every single Tuesday, but sometimes I'll do a video Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday if there's something that we need to talk about, like the upcoming Federal Reserve meeting. I will give you my thoughts as soon as I possibly can. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.